Okay, fantastic. Just got the doors propped open. So I know that folks are now going to be filtering in. This is our virtual auditorium. So I'm just going to kind of fill the space here as folks get the webinar open. So just bear with us. We have a lot of registrants today. Just want to give everyone a moment to get through the door, but really excited to have you here. So as people do start filtering in, I do want to set the scene for what you're looking at on your screen. So you're at LinearB's AI upgrade to your SDLC webinar, and I can still see that folks are joining. So we're going to kick things off with just one or two small icebreakers to get the room warmed up. And if you've ever been in a webinar with me before, hello and welcome back. And if you're new here, well, here's the deal. I really need your help in blowing up the chat in order to start. This is a virtual webinar. I can't get things rolling with an empty chat. And so I will need everybody to make their presence known. And we're going to do that with an emoji game. I had an idea this morning of I want to see the fastest emoji. Like, what emoji and the emoji picker do you think is the fastest one? And so everyone's going to have their opinion on this. Maybe it's a vehicle, maybe it's an animal, maybe it's something else. I want you to drop the fastest emoji you can think of as fast as you can into that chat. And I'm watching the numbers blow up. I'm going to keep getting some more in here. So folks, as you're joining, we're dropping the fastest emoji you can think of into the chat right before we kick off the webinar. And let's see. Oh, there's a lot flying in now. Not a lot of these aren't very fast. A person's probably not faster than a rocket. I'm going to give that comment. I got a unicorn. That's true. Okay, we got vehicles now. I love this.
The salt shaker? I'm like, how?
Yeah, a salt shaker. I love the idea of a salt shaker. A rocket, a meteor. These are all fast things. Okay, there's the UFO.
Yes.
Fantastic. A bird. Okay, great. Everyone gets the prompt. We're dropping the fastest emojis we can think of. There's plenty of more.
What
And no one hit
here?
my no one hit my favorite emoji, which is also pretty dang fast. So I'm gonna keep looking for that one. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and kick things off. So we're in our virtual auditorium. My name is Andrew Zigler, and I'm the developer advocate here at LinearB. I'm also the host of Dev Interrupted, where we talk about software engineering leadership every week, so be sure to check it out. And today I'm joined by two amazing guests here at LinearB to talk about all things AI. I'm joined by Ofer Affias, who leads the AI products here at LinearB, and Vincent Lussenburg, who helps customers use all of those things. So, Ofer, why don't you say hello?
Hi all, very happy to see you here and waiting for this wonderful uh, conversation.
Fantastic. We're excited to have you here. And Vincent, why don't you say hello too?
Same here. Good to see everybody. I'm learning a lot about fast emojis. So far so good. And yeah,
Yeah.
happy to dive into some more the technical questions and some of the people that are going to be inspired by this. You're probably going to be talking to me to actually get it running within your ecosystem. So yeah, back to you,
Fantastic.
Andrew.
So thank you so much. And just as a quick reminder too, it's not just three of us up here. I also have some help in the chat. So if you have questions, please be sure to drop them into the chat. We have folk coming around answering things. We'll make sure all of those get addressed as we go along. And another housekeeping, this is recorded. This is a webinar in 2025. So of course we're recording it. We will send it and you can share it with all of your colleagues as well as come back to the things that you're learning today. Speaking of learning, we have a lot of stuff to cover. So I'm going to start up top with an agenda. And we're going to break this down into 4 sections. First, we're going to set the scene about what are AI code reviews. And then we're going to look at our evaluation experiment that we ran to understand how these tools work. We're going to share those results with you and then also give you the tools to run that yourself. But all of the stuff we're covering today has been included in a report that we emailed you. It has the benchmarking results, the methodology. It's 24 pages and it's packed with insights, some of which we're touching on here. But there's going to be plenty more to dive deeper into. So be sure to read that, check it out. If you don't have it for whatever reason, we'll make sure we get it to you. And starting at the top, we're going to look at AI code review tools. What are they? So let's jump into the landscape about what we're talking about here. So starting from the top with AI code reviews, this is a new fleet of tools available on the market that folks are experimenting with right now. And they're powered by LLMs to provide automated code reviews in natural language. So the advantages and the gains are obvious and they're numerous. You can go faster, you can reduce friction, but as are the potential pitfalls. You can add a lot of noise and complexity to your software. So, in our recent developer survey a few months ago, in partnership with Dev Interrupted, we found that a wide range of enterprise to mid market IT and platform leaders were already adopting tools like AI code review as part of their SDLC. And it's easy to imagine that these numbers you see on the screen here, 49% of them using AI in some way, 34% having mixed collaboration. It's easy to imagine that these numbers have continued to trend up in the months since we've taken the pulse on this survey. So, looking at the AI code review tool landscape, wrap our heads around what we're even comparing here. Because based on the last slide, it's easy to imagine that adopting AI is just a checkbox, but it's not. There's a lot of nuance in each of these offerings that you're seeing on the screen in approaching the problem that we just talked about, creating those automated code reviews for folks to utilize. So, we set out to compare 5 of these tools on the market to understand what makes them different and what makes them better. And on a tool level, we compared them on their clarity. How easy were they to understand? Their configurability, how simple were they to set up and fit to my own production style? And the general DevEx. Was it a joy to use? Could my developer teams actually use this every day? And we're going to talk a little more about how we define those categories, and we're going to get some insights from my guests here on the webinar to talk about them as well. Um, but before we move on, I also want to look at a little closer this competence score you see on the right at the top. This is on a PR level basis. So for each of these tools, we ran many different code review tests to see how they performed. We looked at them on an overall at their competence. Did they catch the bugs or the problems that we introduced? And did they resolve them or suggest good fix for them? Was this a collaborative partner or was this a roadblock? That was a really important thing to evaluate. So now that we've set the scene, you know what AI code reviews are. You've understood the adoption trends. You've even seen a glimpse now of the market space. So let's look at how we benchmarked this tool because the approach was pretty fascinating. Right now in the world of AI, evals are really important. You probably already know this, that when you modify a prompt very slightly or the technology around your AI agent or your tools, you get very different results because those have very varying wide downstream implications when you make those changes. It's just which is why it's so important that you can evaluate and compare and understand the performance of these tools as you change and use them. So we applied that same idea in creating a testing environment for all things AI code review. So AI code reviews, as you know, have to happen in the PR. So there's a bit of orchestration that has to happen. We need a way to get all of these PRs into all of these different environments and run all of these different tools. It's not as simple as just asking a prompt to an agent on your computer and getting a few different results. This benchmark needed some structure. So we created that structure in order to get our answers because we were deeply curious about what made these tools better. So all of the instructions for how we approach this methodology, created the environment, built the scripts, and even wrote to the prompts that created the bugs we were going to talk about. All of that's actually packaged up and included. So it is like a turnkey kind of experience where you're going to be able to run your own evals on this type of experience. So if any of this is interesting and you're looking at these results that we're going to talk about in a moment, and trying to understand now how can I apply these for my team? How can I look closer at them? We're going to give you everything you need in this report to be able to replicate and experiment, go deeper, because everyone has to put on their lab coat like we did. We have to run these tests and understand them for our own teams. So to understand it all from the top, you just need to understand these 3 things. We used AI to add bugs and faulty code to clones of boilerplate projects. This introduced the bugs that these code review tools were going to test. And then we used a repeatable script to isolate the Git environments across different repositories and run those tools. This let us evaluate them in isolation so we can understand how they worked on their own. And in phase 1, we tested really easy bugs, stuff that, most things could probably catch. And everyone did great. In phase 2, we introduced really nuanced bugs, things that are complex and reach across entire domains. And this is where the differences really started to emerge. And this is also where you get key differences in knowing what makes the tools better. So now you're all equipped to look at the results. So I'm going to dive right in to the key findings and tool comparisons chart. So this is the bulk of our benchmarking report, and it's something that I want you to spend a little time looking at here before I make sure I open the floor to my guests here to add any commentary that stood out to them as part of this evaluation. So looking at these ranked results, there's an aggregate competence score. This is what we discussed up front. This is how well did it catch the bugs? Did it propose solutions? And then there's the tool level differentiators. Is it clear? Is it configurable? Is the DevEx experience good? So in this ranking, you can see on the overall, the final scores on the right, LinearB and CodeRabbit, they really stood out for many different things that we're going to talk a little bit closer here in this webinar today.
Mm.
But you can also see that there's some key differentiators where some things are missing in other tools that really apply towards the usefulness in an engineering team's day to day. So before I kind of go in a little deeper at looking at the clarity and configurability, I do want to kind of open the floor because I've been setting the scene and getting us here to the experiment. We did a lot of benchmarking to get here, but I'm curious to know from you, Vincent, and Ofer as well, if there's things from this results that really stood out to you as we were doing this experiment.
Yeah, definitely. For me, I was surprised about Copilot, because I've used it a lot in the past, like the code review aspect of as well, and just using it for vibe coding as well. I would have expected it to be like higher up there, especially beat CodeRabbit. So that was interesting to me. Yeah.
Um, and for me, I think I'm a bit like biased behind the product in LinearB. Um, and what I learned is that I would say it like that. Under the hood, these tools actually are they have differences, which is not only the prompts, because there are like a lot of different engineering approaches that you are taking. And I was very happy to see that we took probably the right decisions. One of them is, for example, when you bring context, we chose with maybe a philosophy of going with on-the-fly RAG, um, because we thought that when you want to bring the context into the review, and this is probably the most important part, one of the most important part in this process. You want to have the let's say the most fresh context that joins to your to what you changed in the PR. And we all know that code changes very fast. So other approaches are like caching, indexing. We chose that, and it proved very well. And overall, I think this is yeah, it's great to see this analysis.
Yeah, yeah. I think that really highlights to the what makes these tools different, right? When you really just like to demystify the AI code review for folks, if you're not super close to the tools and how they work, and at the end of the day, when you boil it all down, it's still just context that you're using, you're inferencing against an LLM. So how you arrange that context, what is in that context, and then how you clean it up afterwards, that is what makes these products, right? So there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of engineering decisions that have to go into even screening for false positives and looking for deeper things within the code base to understand what this code review is actually changing. And those are the things that we expect from our most senior developers and engineers and the folks that we think are really good, you know, code reviewers, right? And so that's a really key thing to keep in mind. So I want us to move into looking a little closer at some of these tool-wide scores. So in particular, I wanted to zoom in on the clarity score. So clarity is communication that's brief, it's descriptive, it's actionable. When it comes to AI, clarity is always about less over more. AI is extremely tempted to boil the ocean in all instances. I think anybody who's asked a simple question to ChatGPT and gotten a novel back knows this. And so it's easy to overwhelm. Anything remotely close to overwhelming in the PR environment creates a problem. It creates roadblocks, and it's a recipe for failure because it causes all of your normal system around PRs to break down because now suddenly they're noisy and they're confusing. And so what happens when your AI is really wordy? It might catch all of the things, but if the devs can't find what to do or how to close the PR with that information, or maybe they just walk away from the PR entirely and avoid the wall of text, then it's not actually helping. And there were some tools like CodeRabbit that stood out in this metric for the wrong reasons because out of the box, it was very wordy. You can see here an example code review that it put in what was ultimately a very simple change, providing many different collapsible sections with lots of extra context. It even out of the box includes like a haiku, which was cute, but like just like a lot of noise, right? And so uh, you can see how overwhelming this might be for, I mean, a newer developer on your team getting this kind of automated feedback on something they're contributing with what is ultimately a simple change. It delays fixes from happening, and it could create some roadblocks. So I wanted to open it back up to our guests here to see if there's anything that stood out about this score and about this experience for y'all, Vincent or
Yeah,
Ofer.
no, I definitely wanted to reflect on that. I see that this is a roadblock with a lot of customers that I work with. The moment that you add a lot of noise to a pull request, not only is it not effective, developers will actually actively rebel against that. So a lot of the focus that we've put into this is making sure that whatever is being generated in that PR doesn't add load, it adds value, doesn't really detract and makes the efficiency go down. And that's actually very hard line to toe because you want to give the right amount of feedback, not overwhelm the developer with like, oh, these are 100 maintainability issues that I've found, but there might be a lot of maintainability issues. How do you report that? How do you configure that? How do you make it in such a way that it's, manageable, that it's bite-sized? So it's a good thing to focus on, I believe.
Yeah.
I would like to also add that for me, it's like from product side and user side, it's one of the things that excites me in this new era of AI, because actually it's you get UX was always important, but you get like now a new challenge how to work with a new kind of UX. And if you look at like the tools that got into our lives, like Copilot and Cursor, etc., it's you see that it's all about the UX, and it's a new kind of UX. For us at LinearB, this is one of the things that I think it's very challenging, because you want to get to a point that out of the box, like the user don't feel the UX. It's like seamless. When you feel there's some frictions, and it's something is wrong, we put a lot of emphasis to that. And we are developers, so it's easy for us like to experiment and to polish it, and we are putting a lot of effort on that aspect.
Yeah, and it is like a new interesting UX. So there's a lot of fine tuning that has to happen to make this experience good. So I wanted us to move on to looking at some other distinctions that we compare on the tool-wide level. So on this slide, we're looking at both the configurability and the DevEx score. So let's start first with configurability. That's looking at how easy it is to customize and control the tool. And so there are some standouts on this. And we're going to talk about LinearB in a moment, but I wanted to start with the GitHub Copilot and why it scored a lower score here in terms of how you could actually configure and orchestrate it. And this is because Copilot is kind of just on wheels with how you can use it within your actual GitHub repo. And there's not as much customization that's offered by other tools in terms of controlling what kinds of PRs it interacts with. And also because it's playing on GitHub itself, which is their turf, it's very visible and prominent in lots of places. You can see even on the DevEx how it scores the highest score, because the GitHub Copilot tool is notably the only one you can assign to a PR while it's still a draft, right? But just because it's inserted there doesn't necessarily mean it's better, which is why we were evaluating its performance on a per bug basis as well. And also on the configurability side, something that stood out for the wrong reasons was Graphite Diamond, and this is because it lacked really any kind of configurable control. Once it was connected to a repo, it proceeded to review everything. Things that were already open, things that maybe it weren't intended to touch, and there's actually no way to configure or control that. And on top of this, it tried to kind of have you do your PR review process on their platform, which offered more context around their tooling and their recommendations. And so you weren't getting that native UX experience where developers are, kind of like what Ofer was mentioning. Like your PR is a system of record, and that's where your work is going to happen, and that's where the conversations need to be. So it's important to keep that consolidated instead of having these tools try to rip your ecosystem apart. So I want to pause there and kind of open it up again to my guests to see if there's anything that stood out to them on these sides, and we can also talk too about LinearB's really standout score here on configurability.
Yeah, I would say just to complete, maybe it's like it's the other end of like opening the box and seeing that everything is set right. But as developers, usually we have like nitty-picky details of how we use the project and what we do, and it's very different even from teams in the same group or different groups for sure. And this is why it's important at the end to be able to turn every knob, change everything to your liking. And with the ability of the Gitstream technologies that we use and we have, you are actually able to extend it to whatever liking you want, including like even get to plugins that you can implement everything. And like this is, I think, a very powerful ability of the approach we took.
Yeah, Vincent, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, partially, I know that there is going to be a slide 11 where I'll be talking about some of the configurability things as well. What I found really interesting is the configurability is a negative again on the amount of like spam that it generates in a way. So oftentimes you do want to have AI code review and something like that, especially if it's something that's being written by human developers. Oftentimes, when you have automated PR, such as created by bots, dependent bot, et cetera, those are the things that in some situations you would love to suppress because you want those pull requests to be small and concise because they are very laser focused on just changing one thing. And in that situation, all that craft is not really needed. It detracts from actually the efficiency of the PR. So it's good to see that there's configurability in some of the code review solutions here. And I can see that there's limitations if that's not present, if you just get that same thing, even for a dependent bot change, which can be really annoying.
Yeah, and that importance on the configurability is really the standout thing here, and I think that's something I want all of our listeners, all of our watchers to really have in their head too, is that one the configurability point, like Ofer mentioned, you have to be able to customize even on a per team, on a per project basis, what needs to happen, what is expected, and what's allowed and what's not. Because without that, you get these breakdowns between the teams, and you start to lose your adoption. People don't trust the tools, and it doesn't fit how they work, right? So it's really important on this DevEx front, this configurability front, to be able to fit the shape of how your teams actually ship software. And so on this next slide, what we're going to do is actually look just at a surface level at some of those phase 2 bugs. So you'll remember a little earlier, I mentioned that there were 2 phases of testing this. We had phase 1, and that was pretty easy bugs, right? It's kind of like these are the Stack Overflow. These are kind of like the OWASP kind of like example bugs, right? And so these are very kind of simple to catch. All of these tools did well. They all caught them, and so that was like a baseline competence displayed by all of them. In phase 2, then we kind of had a little bit of leeway to turn up the temperature a bit and get a little more complexity going. So you can see things here suggested like race conditions and incompatible library versions and microservice complexities, even memory leaks. These are all things that are really, really hard to catch in static analysis, to catch during a code review, especially if some of the parts that are contributing to the problem aren't modified in the PR itself, right? There's a lot of nuance in understanding the code base as a whole. So just to help you orient yourself based on the slides before, and remember the key here, blue is good. So blue means it caught that bug and it proposed a fix. It went above and beyond. This isn't just somebody saying, oh, there's a problem. This is someone saying, oh, there's a problem, and here's how to fix it. Purple is okay. It mentioned or noticed that something was amiss, but it maybe didn't put it all together or it didn't propose a fix. It's pointing you in the right direction, but it's not quite coloring it all in. And orange is bad. We know that by now. It failed to catch it. It didn't find it. This is a part where it didn't actually manage to notice the bug. So there are some obviously standout issues here. The first one that I tried in this particular instance for it was a really hard to catch race condition, right? I'm fresh out of phase 1. They caught all the bugs. I'm like, okay, these things are crushing me. Let's get a really hard bug. And all of them failed to catch the nuance of what that one was trying to do. That was interesting. But there were some parts too where everyone performed really well except for maybe one of the tools that then stood out as being like, why does it have a gap in understanding this problem that all of these other tools could identify? That might indicate a difference in how the engineering decisions are feeding in the context and doing the cleanup on the back end. Remember, there's a lot of nuance to these tools. So I want to pause there, open the floor, my guests here. There were standout things to you from these things, because this is really where you see some of the tools start to pull ahead.
Want to go first, Ofer? Oh. No. Okay. Excellent. Now, what I found really interesting is to look at this, especially bug number 9. That's like a special bug because none of the tools were able to find it. So it's been really interesting to take a look at these different categories of failures, issues that are in source code, and why and how different tools find it. So I found it really interesting to look at it from that perspective. They're like inspired, I believe, with some of the things that we find and at our customers as well. So yeah, that's the reflection that I have on that. I'm curious what we need to do to find that bug 9 as well. So maybe when we do this webinar again in 6 months, there's blue.
I hope for yeah. Sorry, I was like focusing on answering some of the chat's questions, and I'm very single-threaded.
Yeah, all good, all good. Let's see here. I do see the chat is blowing up. I love that everyone is checking out these things. I also have seen a lot of comments about lots of different tools. As y'all know, there's lots of offerings on the market right now. I would love to run more benchmarks on more tools, but what's more important is, remember, we're giving you all the tools to run these benchmarks too. So if there are things that you're thinking about comparing, you can use the same framework to understand them.
Yeah.
So really, this is about equipping you with what you should be looking for, and what's important. Because when we're looking at this slide together, you might look at this and see it's like a wall of color, like, oh, I don't really know what any of these bugs are. I do want to call out that these bugs and their descriptions and even the source code all included in the report, so you can really look deeper. But what's important here is understanding that you need to evaluate these tools for the kind of code that you're shipping, right? You're not shipping hello world applications to your products. Your products are complex and they're nuanced and they have a lot of IP and domain knowledge baked in. So your tool needs to match that. It needs to either have that kind of domain knowledge out of the box that's at your fingertips, or you need to be able to mold it for the information that's important to you. That way it's accurate, it's fast, and it's reliable. And that's where you start to get all blue, right? You start to get the coverage on the problems that matter to you and your team because you're making your tool relevant for you. So as we kind of start to move past this, we're going to start wrapping up some of the conclusions of our presentation. But one of the things I want to show you first, just at the end of our row of tables here, looking a little bit closer at the takeaway. So what did we learn after running all these experiments? You remember at the beginning, we set out at the beginning to really understand what makes them different, and how can a tool be better. So AI code review tools, we learned, they're not a checkbox, right? They're complex, and there's a lot of things you can look for that can both help and hurt. That's why it's important to understand each tool's pros and cons and how it fits with your team. And there are some obvious call outs here. We have the final scores again. You can see LinearB and CodeRabbit really pulling ahead for their configurability, their accuracy, and their coverage on the problems that we tested. But LinearB in particular really stood out with its high control. Earlier we talked about things like you saw like the YAML as code on the left, and we're going to talk a little bit in a moment about how this is just one part of your AI delivery platform, and this is something that you need to be able to have configurable declarative control on. So we're going to talk about that some more in a moment, but that is a real standout feature of that tool. So what tool is best? Really, it comes down a lot to your team size. You can take away from a lot of the strengths and best for columns here. But you're going to have a hard time measuring and understanding that adoption and impact without a control layer, without a platform to orchestrate at it and to look at it, to measure it and to understand it, and also then to talk about it with your non-technical stakeholders, but also with your technical teams. You need that layer in order to understand how any of these tools are doing. So to talk a little bit more about that control layer and about how you can understand the shape of AI in your engineering workflows, I'm going to hand it over to Vincent on our next slide to look a little closer at how AI code review tools are just one tool in a toolbox that you should be applying.
Yeah, definitely. And it really comes down to some of the customization and orchestration that we talked about before. There's more than just code reviews. So we looked at these different things in the report as we talked about it just before. But let's touch on it again real quick, because if you're talking about PR automation, it's much more than just code review. So it's about orchestrating the AI actions as well and leveraging context. Like context in an AI world and in general, context is king. That just makes everything that you're providing so much more useful. If you're taking the context and running like your automations based on that, super, super important. Things like, do you want to auto approve if the AI didn't find any bugs, but only if the PR matches certain rules? Like, for example, only documentation was changed. Or do you want to assign a security officer if sensitive files were touched, or run the AI code review in a different way because you have guidelines for an individual repository? Maybe you have a repository that manages some very sensitive security-centric things, and you want to apply different guidelines for the AI review. Can you customize that? How can you customize that? Is that scalable? How can you maintain it? Things like that. That's where a lot of the PR automation stack that comes with Gitstream is really designed for, high velocity AI code integration. It's included as well as the ability to measure the impact of AI authored or vibe coded PRs. Like, of course, we're focusing on the automation, PR automation, but of course your developers are using Copilot, Cursor, et cetera, to write the code itself as well. So how can you see what the return on investment is? Like, you have invested in Cursor and Copilot to help my developers write code. Okay. If my developers are using that, are my PRs showing that there's less bugs there to begin with, even without the code review? Are there less bugs? Are they more efficient? Am I able to see the return on investment on like basically what I'm investing into AI? So that's one of the things that we really focus on, the combination of the measure and the action. You measure what's going on. There's an action in the sense of like the PR automation, and you measure again to make sure that what you're changing is actually going in the direction that you want to. So ROI is very important there. And also remember, when you're thinking about code review, there's somewhat of the 4 eyes principle that applies to AI as well. Those that know me, I really like to pull in idioms. I love idioms. And there's a popular Dutch idiom that says, the butcher is certifying their own meat. And you can kind of understand what this idiom is about. Like, if I'm certifying my own meat, it's always going to be A+ prime cut. So, of course, if you have, for example, Copilot writing your code and then Copilot reviewing your code, although it's technically like a little bit different, of course, because the AI doesn't have ego. So it's not going to see, oh, this is my code, so it's like super good. There's a lot of the same training data, base assumptions that are underlining that, right? So there is a really good, basically a rationale to use different models, use different prompts, look at the code from a different perspective, because ultimately that's what review is. It's a different perspective than the perspective of the person that just wrote the code, because that's when your value goes away. So that's another very important thing to take into account. Am I, in my automation, in my code review, am I taking care of these multiple perspectives? Am I doing that in the right way? Am I seeding that perspective with the right focus, the focus that is appropriate for my repository, my organization, and such. So yeah, I wanted to add to that.
It's really great extra context, and for folks, if you're curious to learn more about that, we're going to have links and resources that kind of talk more about some of these components. And going back to as well what Vincent just touched on, which I thought was great, about you're going to change all of these different things, you're going to experiment. We're acknowledging that we're in an experimentation phase with these tools, and everyone's figuring out how to find the best value from them without introducing problems. That's why it's so important to have methodologies and approaches to testing and evaluating how you're using these tools over time. That was the inspiration behind this benchmark. And kind of going into our next slide here, I just wanted to touch again on the fact that all of this is tools that we're putting in your hand as part of being here in the workshop with us. You're on this learning journey with us. We're all putting on those lab coats together. And I would love to personally know if anybody runs their own benchmarks and tests following what we talked about here, because in the included report, there's details on all of the bugs and how they were generated, the process by which they were put into the repos, and even an example script you can use yourself. And there's also a framework for scoring and evaluating them. So, testing AI code review tools, it kind of seems tedious on the surface, right? You have to spin up a repo, you have to connect all these different tools, you need to get code there and then push changes, and then you need to read what it says. Is this accurate? Is this good for me? This puts some of those tools in your hand to make evaluating that a little easier. But if you don't have the time or resources to evaluate it, that's fine too. We have a lot of other resources to try out some of the AI tooling that we talked about before. Another thing I wanted to also plug here is our Gitstream Playground, where you can customize and write all of that YAML as infrastructure code that we talked about earlier to see how it would apply for PR. So if you're just curious to learn how this orchestration can work for you, there's an in-browser sandbox you can use to try out some of these tools on your pre-existing PRs and get a sense for how it works. We're all about putting tools of empowerment in your hand. That way you can learn and understand the shape of your own SDLC, and we're here to help you along the way. So before we start coming to the end of our webinar here, I know there's lots of folks again in the chat with lots of great questions. I want to encourage you to keep sharing them. We're going to follow up after here with, anything needed, like a recording, to make sure you all have the resources you need to share this further. But if any of this was interesting, please reach out to us, continue this conversation. We're continuing to build this together. We would love to partner with folks that are learning and using these tools as well. So bringing us then to our closing slides here. I just wanted to also include our CTA for our demo, of course. If any of this has caught your eye, there's lots of folks in the chat who can help you with that. But there's also a URL you can go onto your own time to get in contact with us. But before we wrap up, Ofer, Vincent, any final words about this benchmark, or things you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, I wanted to highlight again is like people have been chiming in on the chat a lot about, hey, how about this tool? How about that tool? I would really encourage these folks to run that and share the results with us, because some of these tools are not quite as accessible online. You need a license for it. So if you guys are using one of these things with a paid license, go for it. Generate the results, give the results back to us. We're interested in that. And then we can like build something together, and then the guide can grow. It's more context. So yeah, like you use it.
And my final thoughts are like, first of all, my takeaway is you got to start to use AI in your developer tools, and then you immediately you start to produce more code, more features, and immediately the bottlenecks, and this is what we believe in LinearB, moves to the right, because now the PR work and the other workflows are like flooded with a lot of more features and code. But the question is, can you deliver more in that time? And for that, we think that First of all, get like an AI review tool. This is the most important thing because it helps to catch bugs and accelerate what you are doing with your accelerated mode of developing features. And think further, because you need to get a grasp of your entire workflow. And like you said, measure and see how it shapes, because it changes in every company. New tools, new workflows, things are changing, and you need to be in control, but leverage this amazing technology of AI.
Couldn't have said it better myself. A really good conclusion on experimenting with AI. I think it's really important everyone is trying this stuff out. We'd love to hear the kind of tools that you're using. And to everyone who joined us and blew up the chat, I see you. I am you. I'm excited that you were here with us. We had a blast with you today. Thank you so much for sharing your fastest emoji. My favorite emoji was the UFO one. So for the 3 of y'all who got that, A+. Please be sure to share this recording with your colleagues, anyone who might be experimenting with AI code reviews. So we're going to follow up with all the great resources. And if you haven't checked out that report yet, which I totally get, we just dropped it in your inbox not that long ago. Now you have every reason to go tear through all 24 pages and figure out, what we just talked about in the shape of some of these bugs we just explored. We'd love to hear what you think and continue the experimentation from there. So thanks again for joining us on your day, and we'll catch you next time.
Awesome. See you guys. Thanks, Andrew.